following program is a production of the Barroom Network. It is intended for all audiences.
Doug Buffone.
This defense sucks. This is moronic.
John Buffone.
If your best run plays are coming off end-arounds, there's a problem.
Doug was behind the microphone first. He never held back.
Very difficult to score when your offense is on the bench. When your defense is out there giving up 70, 80, 70, 64-yard drives.
Now, it's his nephew, John, and there's no holding this Buffone back either.
An offensive-minded coach that's running an offense that got 9 yards and a half. A beaten-up defense that isn't necessarily performing in key situations. And a quarterback that was expected to take a big step forward looks like an unsalvageable wreck.
I've had it. I have had it. I want somebody to get kicked in the ass.
How many games can you rattle off that involve the team running the ball 7 times and they win? I can't think of any.
I don't mind you getting beat. I got my ass whipped many times. But I tell you, I took somebody down with me.
Because Bears fans wanted to believe in the worst way that Chicago had a stable, competitive franchise. And this is what we got.
It's Buffone 55, the John Buffone Show.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Buffone 55, a fast-paced approach to breaking down the Chicago Bears. My name is John Buffone, and with me, as always, is my producer and co-host, Alyssa Barbieri. Alyssa, the Bears are 3-0, and Nick Foles has come to save us all. How are you feeling about that?
I definitely didn't expect to be here this soon, but I think that we all saw this coming, and I feel like there has to be like, how many of these fourth quarter comebacks are you allotted per season? Because I think the Bears reached their limit.
I think my heart has reached its limit, and if it happens again, I'm going to be watching the rest of the games from a hospital bed, but that's neither here nor there. Listen, I'm anxious to share some more thoughts about the game and learn all about their upcoming opponent, the Indianapolis Colts. But first, you have some business to take care of. Go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, John. So I like to remind people and tell our new listeners that an important part of our show is our B55 segment. That's when I ask you 5 questions, and your response must be completed within 55 seconds. The 55, of course, is your tribute to the great Doug Buffone, your uncle, who played 15 seasons with the Bears and wore number 55. And I always love that segment, and I love your interviews with our guests. So let's get to that now.
Let's get to that. We are fortunate enough to welcome George Bremmer, the sports editor at the Herald Bulletin. George has covered the Colts since 2010, and that's why he's our go-to guy for breaking down the Colts. George, how you doing? Thanks for coming on.
Great. Glad to be here.
I'm excited to learn about this Colts team because they're probably going to be the Bears' biggest test so far this year. They're currently 2-1, but not unlike the Bears, they face some teams that are a combined 1-8 after week 3. After back-to-back wins over the Vikings and Jets, in your opinion, just how good is this Colts team right now?
Yeah, I think that's still an open-ended question. I think we really haven't learned a lot about this team through 3 weeks. They had a game in Jacksonville they should have won. Everybody's aware of that. They let it get away. Philip Rivers talked a lot about the frustration of that game. He still has, actually. He brought it up again today in interviews with us. So they channeled that the right way. They beat the Vikings and the Jets the way you should. I think it was 64-18 combined points in there. But they haven't really been tested since the Jacksonville game, and there's still a lot of what ifs with this team. They've got a 38-year-old quarterback. They brought in Xavier Rhodes, who you guys know fully well with the Vikings the last few years, had been struggling. He had a great game against New York. How long can he keep that up? Defense is number 1 right now in points and scoring, but they haven't really faced an offensive juggernaut yet. So I think there's still a lot of questions to be answered with this team, and I think they're hoping some of them will be revealed on Sunday in Chicago.
You talked about that aging quarterback. I want to talk about Philip Rivers a little bit. It was almost a foregone conclusion in the offseason that he was going to end up in Indianapolis. So what are the early reviews about Rivers? Is he what they expected, more or less? How's he doing so far?
I think he's the guy that Frank Wright thought he would be. One of the biggest reasons why he was so connected here and why the Colts were so interested is the history he has with this coaching staff. 3 years with Reich out there in California, 5 years with the offense coordinator, Nick Sirianni. The tight ends coach, Jason Michael, was also out there with him. So he came in with a real knowledge of the offense that they probably couldn't have gotten anybody else who would be able to get up that quickly. And then when the offseason kind of went the way it did and you had no OTAs and no preseason games, I think that became even more important, having a quarterback who knew this offense forward and backward. He's got a high completion percentage, I think 78.3, leads the league right now. His yards per attempt is at 8.6. Those are the two numbers that the Colts really want to look at the most. Those were two things that Jacoby Brissett really didn't do last year for them. But his counting numbers, so to speak, they're ordinary right now. 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, I think 794 yards. He's been very efficient. There haven't been a ton of big plays yet. T.Y. Hilton hasn't really gotten going yet. But he's done what he's needed to do in the last 2 weeks to win the game. And I think that's, they didn't bring him in here to put on a cape and be Andrew Luck and save the day every week. They brought him in here to make plays and move the ball. And so far, except for on third down, he's done that.
I want to hit on the running game as well, because the Colts lose Marlon Mack to an Achilles injury. He's done for the season. They've been leaning pretty heavily on rookie Jonathan Taylor, who in the first couple games has looked pretty darn good. What are the early reviews on him, and can he be that workhorse guy that totes the rock 15, 20 times a game? And obviously you have a changeup guy in Naheem Hines.
Yeah, it was actually funny. His first start against the Vikings, he had 11 carries in the first quarter, and some of us in the press box were kind of looking around to see if Wisconsin's offensive coordinator had snuck into the booth. But he's definitely that workhorse kind of back. He's a rookie, and you see it at times. He's missed some holes. He doesn't always make the right cut. He does things that you would expect a rookie with no preseason games to do. But he moves the pile on almost every play, and I think that's one thing you have to respect right away. There's one that kind of went viral from the Jets game where it looked like all 11 defenders were around the pile, and it just kept moving for 3, 4, 5 yards till they finally got him down. He's just that sort of power guy, but I think he also he's got 4.3 speed, which is very unusual for a guy his size. And I think that's what the Colts feel like, that home run is in there. They haven't gotten it yet. I think his long run is 12 yards. Did have a 35-yard reception in week 1 against the Jags. But I think they feel like the running game is done well, but there's a lot still there that they've kind of left on the field in the first 3 weeks. The offensive line is a big strength of this team. That's really where this team makes its money. But I think around the league there was kind of a conception that maybe of all the units, the offensive line would be the most hurt by having no preseason, because they've got to get out there and gel together. And this line at times feels like it's not there yet. They're not playing poorly. There's only 3 sacks, but they're only averaging about 3.8 yards per carry. And I think they are hoping that as the line gets its feet under it and gets back to the level it's been in the last couple of years, and as Taylor gets more snaps, the running game will become a real threat for this team.
Yeah, you talked about the offensive line. I want to talk about the tight ends a little bit. Obviously, they bring in Trey Burton, who Bears fans know pretty well. He landed on injured reserve with a calf injury. He can come off in a couple, I think, this week. But what's the current outlook on the tight ends as a whole? You got Jack Doyle, Burton, and then kind of a freakish athlete in Mo Alley Cox. Is that guy going to be? Is he going to be the high riser in the tight end room?
He's kind of the story of the year so far for the Colts. 5 catches for 111 yards against the Jets. Had a 511 yards against the Vikings. He had a 45-yarder against the Jets that everyone's kind of giving him crap about because he had all the room in the world. He turned around. There was nobody around him for miles, and he almost didn't know where to run. It looked like he looked for somebody to run into. So some of his teammates have kind of given him a ribbing over that one. But, yeah, he's a matchup nightmare. He was a basketball player at VCU. The last 2 years he's been one of those guys that you kind of talk about. He looks good in training camp, and he's a breakout candidate, and it just hadn't come together. Rivers has a history, obviously, with big targets to begin with, and tight ends as well. And really, they've got a chemistry going that's probably been the best of any of the receiving group right now. And with the wide receivers banged up, Michael Pittman's not going to play Sunday. He got compartment syndrome. That was a really scary thing after the game this week. He's going to be out indefinitely. Paris Campbell is out for the foreseeable future with a knee injury. So they're banged up at receiver, and I think they've leaned heavier on the tight ends because of that. Jack Doyle missed week 2. He's back this week. He's kind of their do-everything back. And then Burton is a guy that I think this is what happened from what we understand in Chicago, too. There was a lot of excitement coming out of training camp. He looked really good. He got hurt during the scrimmage at the stadium, the last scrimmage at the stadium, and so he's missed the first 3 weeks. He's back on the practice field right now. No indication yet, how that goes, whether or not he'll be ready to go on Sunday. But he looked really good with Rivers. He's a guy, they use him in the slot quite a bit, and I think as they move forward, he's a guy they're going to look at to kind of take up some of the slack from these receiver injuries. But he's got to get healthy, and I think that's kind of been the knock on him for his career so far.
Yeah, that's a story that Bears fans know all too well. You see the flashes, you see the potential, but you can't get him on the field for any extended period of time. And it seems, unfortunately, for Burton, because you don't want to see anybody, keep getting banged up, but that seems to be something has traveled with him from team to team. You talk about those banged up receivers. Obviously, the tight ends can't fill in for everyone. So you say T.Y. Hilton's struggling, but who's left? Who's going to be on the field? Who's going to be some of the receivers the Bears are going to be lining up against come Sunday?
Yeah, probably a bunch of guys people in Chicago have never heard of, I would imagine. Zack Pascal was a leading receiver for him last year. He's a guy out of Old Dominion who's just gotten better every year. Really a workhorse type of guy. He really made his name and earned his roster spot originally by blocking. Really physical guy. They started to kind of draw up some plays for him because he had been in on so many running situations. Defenses started to kind of expect it, started to draw up some plays for him to kind of catch people by surprise. And he's really kind of taking a step forward every year. They're going to need that from him again now. He'll probably be the number 2 guy for the foreseeable future. And then Darius Fountain was a 5th-round pick in 2018, has been basically to hell and back. I mean, he was the only rookie that year, the only draft pick who got cut. He gets back on the practice squad. About 2 months later, he finds out his grandma died. He has to drive to Wisconsin, grieve for her. He finally comes up to the main roster in the playoffs, drops his only target in a playoff game against the Chiefs. Last year, had an outstanding training camp, looked like he's ready to take the next step, and got a horribly gruesome ankle injury during a joint practice with the Browns. Was 3 surgeries later. He still had pain in July. Put it all together to have a good training camp again, but they were deep at receiver, didn't make the team. Now here he is with that first opportunity. His first 2 catches last week against the Jets. He's a guy I think they feel like can make some plays for him, but obviously no real history on the field for him. And then after that, there's a possibility they'll call Marcus Johnson up from the practice squad. He's been with them the last couple years in and out. But it's really an unproven group, and they need to get T.Y. Hilton going. He had 5 catches against the Jets and looked the best he's looked all year, but he's dropped some key passes in the first couple of weeks, and obviously they need some big plays from him and get that passing game jump-started.
Geez, if nothing else, he at least got a couple of made-for-TV movies out of some of those guys on the roster. That's an incredible story. I want to real briefly talk about the big fellas up front, only because Quentin Nelson was such a polarizing figure on the Barroom Network here whenever he was coming out come draft time, where those who shall not be named wanted the Bears to take him with the 8th overall pick. So how has the unit looked so far, and is Quentin Nelson getting better by the second?
Yeah, well, I mean, he's the only guard that I know of in the league who has his own highlight reel. It feels like every week there's some kind of viral video involving him. This week it was him and Mark Glowinski both kind of getting back and resetting themselves and picking up 2 pass rushers and giving Rivers enough time to hit that 45-yarder to Mo Alley-Cox. The offense coordinator went nuts. I think Brian Baldinger is the biggest Quentin Nelson fan on earth. You go to his Twitter account every week. He's glowing over him. But, this is a guy that he's as advertised. He's been a brawler for this team. He starts every week no matter what's going on with him. And he's just – when he came in the day he was drafted, Jim Irsay, who's prone to a bit of hyperbole, started throwing around John Hanna's name. and talking about the Hall of Fame on the day he was drafted, and somehow the kid has lived up to that hype. So he's one of the biggest offensive weapons they have. I don't know what that says about the rest of the offense, but Quentin Nelson's definitely a huge piece of this franchise.
All right, let's switch sides of the ball. Let's turn our attention to the defense. The Colts have had one of the best defenses in the league through 3 weeks. They've allowed 15 points per game. That's the fewest in the NFL. 132 passing yards per game, fewest in the NFL, and 93.3 rushing yards per game, which is the fourth fewest. But that being said, and this is the same argument we hear towards the Bears a lot, they've faced the Jaguars, Vikings, and Jets in their first 3 games. So is there going to be a coming down to earth, not necessarily against the Bears, because it's not like they're not like they're setting the world on fire either, but is there eventually going to be a coming down to earth period for the defense, or are they this good?
Yeah, I think that's going to even out at some point. I don't think they're the best team in the league. I think that's definitely going to come back down. And a big part of this early success is they haven't been on the field a whole lot. The offense is dominating time of possession. They've had some turnovers. They had 6 interceptions in the last 2 weeks, which is a huge number. That's a big focus for this defense anyway. And you guys know the cover 2 scheme well. The Bears ran it for years under Lovie Smith. You know what the game plan is there. The last 2 weeks, it's worked the way it's supposed to. They've been able to take advantage of opponents' mistakes. The defensive line's been very active in getting to the quarterback. When that happens, the defense looks really good. When it doesn't, it looks like week 1, and a quarterback has a lot of time and completes passes to holes that are open all over the field, and they move. They get torn apart. So far, they've avoided that more often than not. I think Xavier Rhodes has been a lot better than he was the last couple of years in Minnesota. See how long that can continue. TJ Carey's a guy that they brought in from Cleveland, who was supposed to be more of a bench kind of factor, but Rock Ya-Sin, their other starter on the outside, has had a mysterious illness. Nobody's really sure what happened. He literally about 5 hours before kickoff against the Vikings, he was rushed to a local hospital. He didn't play that game, obviously. He didn't play last week. He came back to practice on Wednesday. TJ Carey's filled in, had 2 interceptions, took one back for a touchdown last week. He's looked good in his spot. And then Kenny Moore, probably the most underrated nickel cornerback in the league. He's a great blitzer, which you wouldn't think. In the first half against the Jets, they could not get Sam Darnold on the ground. They had pressure left and right, but they could not tackle him. And then here comes the little nickelback. He's the first one to go and put him down. And it seemed like it kind of turned everything around for the defense after that. So they have some pieces. Darius Leonard, everybody's aware of, all-pro linebacker, flies all over the field. He looks the same as ever. They added DeForest Buckner on the defensive line. He's a huge piece of what they want to do. He's been a real force. And Justin Houston's had at least half a sack in every game this season. But they also have moments. They're prone to lapses in long stretches where they can't stop people. We'll see how long they can avoid that, as the season goes on here.
Yeah, with Nick Foles in at quarterback, there's not as much mobility, and that means that the offensive line needs to hold some blocks a little bit more sometimes. Let's talk about the pass rush for the Colts. So they have their own little 1-2 punch with DeForest Buckner and Justin Houston, like you mentioned. Are they getting consistent pressure on the quarterback, and is that something that the Bears are going to have to adjust or plan or even fear?
Yeah, that's the one thing they've done consistently. Even against Jacksonville, they got into the backfield. They just weren't able to get to Gardner Minshew a lot of times. He was able to make some plays with his legs, and when he did, things broke down in the secondary, and the Jaguars were able to move the football. But they've been in the backfield quite a bit. I think they have 9 sacks, but they've got a lot more hits. And it's Houston and Buckner have led the way, obviously, and they're the 2 biggest forces out there. But Denico Autry at the other defensive end spot, I think he's kind of taking advantage of all the attention that's being paid to the other side. He's got 2 sacks as well. He's been a factor for them. That's the one thing that they thought they would be able to do this year. Brian Baker came in. He had been the defensive line coach at Alabama, and he'd been in the NFL for years before that. And he's really kind of put a kind of physical bulldog mentality into that defensive line that have been missing the last couple of years. They've been a lot more active. I think there's a mentality with that group right now that they feel like they're the train that drives this team, and they've lived up to it so far.
Well, you've done a good job at scaring Bears fans, so let's give them something to look forward to. Is there something that the Bears could key in on this Colts defense, where maybe it's a soft underbelly with the linebackers on crossing routes, or maybe there's going to be some opportunities to run the ball a lot with David Montgomery, or the tight ends can flourish? What's something that they have not done well, despite the fact they've got some fantastic defensive stats so far? Is there any kind of soft underbelly that the Bears can take advantage of?
Yeah, I think sometimes the running numbers right now are a little bit skewed. If you look at the average, it's over 4 yards per carry. So the total is good. It's fourth in the league. But I don't think the yards per attempt is as good as it should be. They had some trouble, especially against Jacksonville, slowing down, I think it's John Robinson, the undrafted rookie that the Jaguars have back there. He hurt him in the first half especially. That helped open things up for Minshew as well. Neither the Jets or the Vikings were able to run the ball as well, and I think that's been one of the big differences in those 2 weeks. The other thing is, as ever with that cover 2 defense, if you give the quarterback time, the plays that he does have a chance to sit in the pocket, there are holes out there. And I know Foles is experienced enough, he's been around long enough to understand how to find those and exploit them. And I think, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but the Colts' history against Allen Robinson when he was in Jacksonville is not good. He's had he's been a real Indianapolis killer for most of his career. So I'm sure that the Bears are aware of that and will try to, attack that as much as they can on Sunday as well.
I'm going to go to a subject that we always go to on this show, just because we always envy teams that have, we'll just say, competent special teams units. So if you had to pick something that to spotlight on the Colts special teams unit, whether it's the kicker, the punter, the long snapper, the gunner, what have you, what's something that sticks out on the special teams unit?
Rigoberto Sanchez, their punter, has been on fire. I think he's had 3 or 4 punts go inside the 10, and they haven't punted a lot this year. And on Sunday, he really helped control the game. He flipped the field a couple times. He even pinned they got a safety, which they've done in back-to-back weeks for the first time since 1960. And on the free kick on that, he even pinned that kick inside the 10, which you don't see that often on kickoffs. He's done a really good job. He was kicking short on kickoffs, even on normal, regular kickoffs during the game, and they were able to pin the Jets inside the 20 an awful lot. He's really affected field position a great deal, and he's done it in a lot of different ways. I think he's a guy that probably isn't getting as much credit right now as he should, but I will say that the Colts all week have been talking up Cordarrelle Patterson. They think he's the best return guy in the league, and they're very aware of trying to contain him on Sunday.
You heard it here first. Indianapolis Colts punt unit, elite. Watch out for it. So before I turn you over to Alyssa for some follow-up questions, I got to get your prediction on the game. They tried to get us last week with the kiss of death. Anytime one of our guests picked the Bears, they usually lose. We broke that curse last week. So what is your prediction for this game?
I think it's going to be really, really close. The Colts have a rookie kicker who's 8 of 10 right now, and he's hit the upright on 2. So I'm very interested to see how things go for him in the Windy City. Really only the second time he's kicked outdoors this season, and I think that can be a stadium that can be a lot of fun for kickers. So I think it may come down to a field goal, and we'll see if he can get it or not. I'll go 27-24 in the Colts' favor with the rookie coming through, but it won't surprise me if it goes the other way.
God help us all if this comes down to a kicking duel with the Chicago special team unit and a rookie kicker on Indianapolis. I can't even fathom that. I'm not even going to think about that. I'm going to go cry in the corner. Alyssa, take over for me. If you have any questions for George, you want to shout out him before we get him out of here.
For sure, but I'd also like to thank George for picking the Colts. So I'm hoping that our streak continues here. And hopefully someone else can do a double doink besides a Bears kicker at Soldier Field. So, I can't believe I brought that up. But George, I wanted to ask you about Frank Reich's comments on Nick Foles. So earlier this week, he talked about how he was as about unflappable a person as he's ever seen, how he has a knack for making big plays, that he's, quote, a magician with the ball, and he can throw and deliver the ball from every angle. So what are your thoughts on Reich's praise of Foles and what the Colts could be facing this week?
Yeah, the Bears legitimate. He really, really is a huge fan of Nick Foles. They were obviously together during the Super Bowl run in Philadelphia. He's a fan of him on and off the field. He talks about what a great person he is, what a great locker room presence he is. But I think, from what I understand, when the offseason was, fresh, Foles was in, they considered talking to Jacksonville about getting Foles. It was one of the options on the table if they couldn't sign Rivers. I mean, obviously, Rivers was the number one choice, and that happened. But everything we had heard was that Foles was 1B, and that was where they were looking. Obviously, the Bears were able to go in and get him, and now he's got his starting opportunity again. You've seen him make big plays in big moments. It seems like every year for the last few years, and I think that's what Wright is most impressed about. He feels like every time the stage is the biggest, and the moments, at the most important time, Foles steps up, makes a play, and gets his team, in winning position. He did it again last week, coming off the bench cold and leading that comeback against the Falcons. So I think that respect is genuine. It's not just, I know there's a lot of coach speak when you're playing a team that week, but I think Frank Reich is saying his honest opinion of Nick Foles.
And, I would like to thank you for going with Phillip Rivers, because Bears fans are very lucky to have Nick Foles now after those first 3 weeks. But you talked a little bit about Cordero Patterson and how, the Colts are concerned about facing him. So do you think that would be your biggest concern heading into this game, or is there something else that you're more concerned about?
Yeah, I think Patterson's obviously something that is going to be a big factor as far as the Colts are concerned. But I think that pass rush from Chicago, you got Khalil Mack, obviously, and everybody knows how much he can take over a game. And you got Robert Quinn this year, and that's a really good 1-2 punch. They haven't seen anything like that so far this year. Nothing on terms of that experience and that kind of resume for these pass rushers. I think that's going to be something that they've got to deal with and see if the offensive line can hold up. The Colts feel like that's a strength, but we'll see. And you wonder how – I'm always interested in how Chuck Pagano will impact this situation. I would think he's going to be a little fired up this week, having been the head coach here previously. But there's very few – we were trying to count today at practice. There's only like 6 or 7 players. And 3 years is an eternity in the NFL. So there's not very many guys here who played when he was here. I don't know how much inside knowledge he's got in that regard, but I would think he and that defense are probably going to be a little more keyed up than maybe any other week, just because of the history he has here in Indianapolis.
All right, George, before we kick you out of here, can you tell us what you're working on and where we can find all of your stuff and follow you on social media?
Yeah, well, we're supposed to talk with Pagano tomorrow, so there'll be a little story about that and what he thinks of going against the Colts for the first time, really, since he left. And obviously he means a lot here in this city with the leukemia battle and everything he went through and the foundation. He's raised hundreds of millions of dollars for IU Simon Healthcare here in their cancer center. So that goes way beyond football, and I think there'll be some storylines on that. You can follow me at GM Bremmer on Twitter and heraldbulletin.com.
That's George Bremmer, sports editor at the Herald Bulletin. George, thank you so much for being on Buffone 55. I think we all have a better idea of what the Bears are going up against, and we'll talk to you down the road.
No problem. Thanks a lot for having me.
All right, we got a lot more show coming up. We'll be right back.
On the debut episode of Pass the Mic, veteran sports writer and broadcaster Peggy Kaczynski talked about having things mansplained to her after she's made an error.
When you make a mistake, it's devastating, and we all feel it. You don't need anyone telling you or pointing out that you were wrong about this. Yes, I get it. The best thing to do is to admit it immediately, post it, say it, and move on from it. Make a joke of it and move on. But when they repeatedly want to try to point out that, well, that's why you don't really know football. I'm like, dude, just because you played high school football in Chicago doesn't mean you know any more than I do, okay? Stop. You stopped at high school, okay? That is not the greatest end all. We could all catch up to anything you learned from then on. And it really ekes me when guys try to do that, and they do it because it makes them feel better. So once you realize that, you have to brush them off. You have to literally brush them off like a little piece of dandruff on your shoulder and just, hey, oh yeah, that was there. Sorry, and move on.
Pass the Mic with John Buffone and Alyssa Barbieri 2 times a month on the Barroom Network.
Welcome back. Now it's time for our B55 segment. That's when I ask John 5 questions, and he has 55 seconds to respond. The 55 is John's tribute to the great Doug Buffone, his uncle, who played 15 seasons with the Bears, and of course wore number 55. So John, you ready to do this?
Let's do it. I'm ready.
So by now, everyone that follows football knows about Nick Foles' late game heroics against the Falcons. However, the timing of the substitution was surprising to many. What was your reaction when you saw Foles enter the game? 55 seconds and go.
In all honesty, I was shocked. They weren't completely out of the game, and Mitch had a late comeback back in week 1, so I figured they'd just throw him out there and let the chips fall. And I never thought that we'd see Nick Foles as long as the Bears had a winning record. I assume they would let this whole Mitch Trubisky experiment end whenever it bottomed out and exploded. But Nagy said after the game, they talked about making the change at halftime. So even after Mitch had that long run and was able to score a touchdown late in the first half, he was on a short leash headed into the third quarter, and then that awful interception kind of sealed the deal, and Nagy had finally seen enough. I just didn't expect to see it when it happened, because I saw Adam Johns with The Athletic tweet something along the lines of, if you bench Trubisky, you can't go back. And I tend to agree with that. The experiment is over. He could get back in because of injury or something else, but if you looked at him on the sideline, he wasn't pouting or looking angry. He just looked defeated, and I don't think he can reclaim any kind of that confidence in Chicago.
Yeah, like you, I was shocked about like when it happened, because like you said, he has a winning record with the team. He had that comeback a couple weeks ago against the Lions, but it was the right decision to make. You know,
Sure.
You saw just how different that offense looked with Foles in there. It was like somebody like hit the play button and it was going in slow motion before. Like, you know, it felt like that was the right decision to make. So I was definitely shocked, but you know, there is no going back now. This is Nick Foles' team.
Yeah, at least for this year, it is. So, but I think that the outside of injury or anything serious like that, the Trubisky experiment is over.
And so, although Nick Foles is the hero of the week, both he and Trubisky share a late game comeback win so far. I can't believe they've had 2 of these within 3 weeks.
Right.
What are some of the differences between the 2 quarterbacks' play that you noticed right away? The clock starts when you do.
Well, one thing I noticed right away was the trajectory of a ball thrown by Nick Foles compared to that of Mitch Trubisky. Mitch had a real hard time with throws down the field. He shanked a throw to Ted Ginn that landed out of bounds. He missed a deep throw to Tariq Cohen. Then he obviously missed a wide open Anthony Miller that could have been another touchdown. So when I look at Foles, I see him standing strong in the pocket, and he delivered strikes. Look at the game winner to Anthony Miller. He saw the pressure. He didn't do that whole dipsy-do dunkaroo spin move to avoid it, and he just kind of stared it down and delivered an incredibly accurate ball. You just saw a more calm, probably more confident quarterback step into a situation and just play football. And from a distant observer point of view, I think Foles reads defenses better and his pre-snap understanding is better. Now, obviously, you don't get the athleticism and mobility with Foles that you get with Mitch Trubisky, and you probably won't see Nick Foles scamper for 45 yards or spin out of tackles, but I'd probably take Foles' skill set as of right now.
Yeah, Foles looks like a quarterback back there, you know, like we've been waiting to see what Matt Nagy's offense is going to look like. And I feel like we got a glimpse of that when Foles was in there. Like you said, he stood cool, calm, collected in the pocket, took that big hit on that game winner to Anthony Miller. And, you know, just to, you know, you talk about like some of the misses that Trubisky had earlier in the game, that deep shot to Miller, which then Foles then connected on. So like you see that Foles, he's a veteran quarterback. He has a good understanding. I feel like if there had been an offseason and a preseason, that we wouldn't even be talking about this because Foles would have won the job. And you saw, because it took him a little longer to get acquainted with this offense. But if he had had more time, I think that Foles would have started from the get-go.
Yeah, and I kind of said that in the summertime whenever we thought that there still might be a preseason. I thought that in game, if they were able to play some preseason games and they would put actual game film side by side and look at Trubisky beside Foles, that I thought that Foles was probably going to win the job, and they brought him in for that purpose. And he just seems less skittish than Mitchell Trubisky. And I understand that Foles has been in the league longer, but you didn't see the, just the skittish, bail, run to the side, maybe try to make a throw, or just launch the ball up. And we saw some bad interceptions. And I'm not saying that Foles is, the second coming and he's the savior and he's going to be the quarterback for the next 5-6 years. And we finally found our guy in Chicago. But I think that if you're looking in the short term, this is the guy. So I'm behind Foles right now.
And it was different. Every time Trubisky dropped back to, pass and throw deep, you're like, oh God, what's going to happen? Yes. When Foles was doing it, even on fourth and long to Ted Ginn, like you didn't really feel that same way. You felt like he could connect because he's shown that he can do that. So, excited to see what Foles can do moving forward with a full week to get preparation and a full game to show what he can do.
That's true, because now he's getting a full week of number one reps. He's getting the whole, getting to look over film, expecting to be the starter. So I am really, really anxious and interested to see how this goes.
So speaking of surprises, the defense has been under fire by the Twitter sphere for being inconsistent at times. They were gashed by Todd Gurley this week and little-known Brian Hill, and they gave up over 140 yards on the ground. But they also limited Matt Ryan to a single touchdown and also picked him off late in the game to seal the win. Is this defense getting unfairly criticized? Your 55 seconds start now.
Well, we kind of talked about this last week, but I think the defense had much higher expectations. And we, and that includes me, assumed the defense was going to be consistently dominant and the offense was only going to need about 17 points per game to pull it off. But there have been some inconsistencies. We've seen a lack of a pass rush at times. We've seen bad offenses drive down the field with ease, and we've seen less than stellar linebacking. They're currently 15th in the NFL in yards allowed at 364 yards per game. But let's look at some other numbers. They're 9th in the league in points allowed at just 20.7. They have 3 interceptions, which is tied for 3rd best. And they could even have more if it wasn't for a couple of borderline penalties. So they are very much a bend but don't break defense right now. They're giving up a lot of yards, 17th in run defense, 17th in pass defense. But they're keeping teams out of the end zone, and they're making big plays when they need it, much like, picking off Matt Ryan to essentially end the game. So the defense is still solid. It just has some warts this year.
Yeah, I think, like you said, we hold this defense to such high expectations. We expect them to be the best. With the offense, I mean, any sign of improvement, we're happy about. But with the defense, showing, some struggles here and there, it's concerning. But like you said, there are some concerning aspects like the run game, but there are some encouraging things like the pass rush finally getting going these last couple of weeks. So it's going to be interesting to see that. But I also wonder, I was thinking about this earlier this week, at times the Bears have had this tendency to play down to the level of their opponent sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
If they're playing some of these teams that, aren't so good. But then when the competition and the talent, the competition starts ramping up, then you get to see, what they're made of in those big night games, thinking back a couple of years ago against the Rams and those Vikings games. So, I'm interested to see when they start playing those good teams, these good offenses, how they're going to match up.
Well, they're going to need it this week. I think so far, this will be their biggest test. So, I know that Atlanta has a good offense, but they were without Julio Jones this week. They're gonna have to deal with a good offensive line, a good run game, and I know that the passing game has a lot of injuries, but this is a pretty competent offense they're going against. So they're going to need to put it all together.
I'm not going to lie, George scared me a little bit. He had me a little bit worried there listening to break this team.
I don't like what George said.
But he did pick the Colts to win, so that's a good sign, right?
Very good sign. Always that always is a good sign on this show.
Okay, John, you ready for this? It's time for your favorite subject, kickers.
Oh, neat.
Cairo Santos was 1 of 2, but he missed a field goal early in the game, and that could have proven fatal later on. I know you hate talking about kickers, but what's your current feelings on the Bears' kicking situation?
I think my feelings on the kicking situation are pretty well documented, but we'll give it another shot. I said last week the game could not be left to Cairo Santos kicking the ball. And mainly, I meant because the Bears needed to score touchdowns. But the other reason was because I don't fully trust the guy to make a big kick. And when he missed that early field goal, the wind went out of my sails because the offense moved the ball a little bit and came away with nothing. So from what I understand, Eddie Pinheiro is eligible to come off the IR this week, but might not because he's not fully healed. But honestly, we haven't seen Pinheiro kick in 10 months? So who's to say he won't need to knock off some rust and miss some early kicks? So I just don't know why the kicking game in Chicago has to be so unpredictable. I continue to believe there is a curse that only Robbie Gould can break by either retiring or maybe he comes back and kicks for the Bears again, or perhaps he has to do a ceremonial dance around Hollis Hall that ends with him kicking Ryan Pace in the ass. I'm so tired of talking about kickers and the Windy City, and now George tells me that they could be a kicking duel, and that's gonna raise my anxiety through the roof.
I think it's fair at this point to assume that there's a curse. I mean, this thing's been going on for 4 years after Gold left.
Yeah. It's
just insane. And, you mentioned Cairo Santos missing that field goal on the opening drive in a dome. He missed it in a dome. Come on, man. Like you said, Eddie Pinheiro, I don't think he's going to be coming back. Matt Nagy said that he didn't really sound very optimistic about Pinheiro. But again, he hasn't kicked in a while, and he's coming off the injury. So I don't know, is Santos the better option here? Or are we bringing in another kicker? I don't want to do this kicker stuff anymore, John.
I am so tired of talking about kickers. I want to ignore it, but it seems to be a very important part of the game nowadays. So I guess we got to talk about it, I guess.
Well, maybe with Nick Foles coming in here, maybe they can just consistently throw touchdowns, and all we have to worry about go for two. Yep. So we're going to finish this segment with the head coach. So Matt Nagy has had his share of criticism from play calling to game management, but he is the head coach of a 3-0 football team. How do you think the head coach has handled this season so far? The clock is off. Take your time.
Look, I didn't get a chance to talk about this before, but it took some serious, we'll say, chutzpah from Matt Nagy to make that decision to pull Mitch Trubisky when he did. But I think, if nothing else, this head coach is unwavering in his vision of what he thinks it takes to win. We talked about this directly after the game, but for him to make that move when he did, he had to be seeing things that weren't always visible for the rest of us. We've seen a side of Matt Nagy that shows he believes his system is what makes the team successful. There isn't a whole lot of flexibility in that system, and it's not crafted around the players he currently has. We kind of saw last year when he tried to expand upon the offense and then Trubisky regressed. I think he wants to make this system finally work this year, and the guy pulling the trigger was not running it the way his coach wanted him to run it. I think he has installed a guy now he believes will run the offense like it's supposed to be run. So will it be a success? Time will tell. There are still a lot of question marks around this team, but for him to change the quarterback in the third game of the season when the team was sitting at 2-0, that shows me that his patience ran out, and he desperately wants to show that his offense can produce if it is run the right way. So we will see if Nick Foles can be that guy on Sunday. Well, that wraps up the 555 segment. It is time to go to our last segment. We call it Buffone's Basement. And Alyssa and I walk down the stairs. We pour some cold water on Aldo Gandia. We wake him up out of his stupor. We turn off the All in the Family reruns he's watching. Aldo, you with us?
That's right, you meathead. 1970s reference there.
I got it.
How are you guys? Great interview with George, man.
That was amazing.
Yeah, but I don't like when the guest knows too much and then scares me about the opponent. So we need to get less educated guests on here to make me feel better about the Bears' chances. But he talked about a lot of injuries on the receiving core, which I mean obviously bodes well for the Bears, but the Bears lost a big explosive player as well in Tariq Cohen, that ACL on just a stupid play. I mean, it got it rolled up on a fair catch on a punt. Yeah. I'll go around the horn and ask you guys, what does the loss of Tariq Cohen mean for the offense? Because he could run and catch at the same time. Although I'll just start with you because we just brought you on. Mm-hmm. What do you feel about losing Tariq Cohen?
It's a big loss. I mean, they didn't sign him to an extension because they didn't really appreciate what he brings to this offense. But at the same time, I feel that there are other guys on the team that can do some of the things that he does. Ted Ginn will probably return punts, and he's done it for about 8 of his NFL seasons. The last 2 years he hasn't, so perhaps it'll be somebody else. But Ted Ginn had a really good career returning punts, so I think he's going to get serious consideration. I think Cordell.
Why was Anthony Miller back there?
No way. That's how he got injured last time.
Why was he there?
Yeah, that should not happen. I don't understand that. Now, he's good at it, and he's got experience at it, so I guess the coaching staff feels like, why not? But that shoulder is so brittle. And then you and I and Tyler talked on Sunday on our Bear football show about Cordero Patterson, having the capability to do a lot of that gadget stuff that Tariq does. So I don't anticipate there being a huge absence, a void there that has to be filled, but you never know.
I think I'm with Aldo on this. Like, it is a big loss. Obviously, like you said, they extended him for a reason. He's just like magical to watch sometimes on the field and what he can do. But they do have other guys on the team that can do that. And we're starting to see that, I think they're about to, or they are going to work out Lamar Miller. Like, they're looking to bring in other guys too. But, I feel like losing Cohen, it hurts, but it's not the end of the world. It's much better than losing, knock on wood, David Montgomery. Like, that would be absolutely devastating, like, at this point. So, I mean, not that it's a good thing that Cohen got hurt, but, it's better him than Montgomery.
For sure.
How about them bringing in Lamar Miller for a tryout? I saw that he was on the list of trials today. Does he bring anything to the table, or is that just a courtesy, or what do you think about that? Because they brought in they upgraded or they brought up the guy from the practice squad. So why do you bring in a veteran now to try out unless you really think that he has something left?
He's been versatile. Like, he's good in the pass game too, which is what obviously they're losing with Tariq Cohen. So he's been just as successful, running up the middle as he is in the pass game. So I think that's maybe why they're taking a look at him. And obviously Artavis Pierce, who they did bring up from the practice squad, has that capability as well. But I think they're just trying to, look around and, see, what's best to do.
Yeah, typically every week they bring in, 3, 6 or more guys for tryouts, just so that they can keep abreast as to the free agents that are out there, what do they look like, and so forth. And so they may not be thinking about making a free agent pickup immediately, but if somebody goes down this weekend, then they'll know, well, we looked at Lamar Miller last week and he looked, good enough for us to sign. Let's pick him up right away before anybody else does. So it's
knock on wood.
Yeah. So really. So it's just kind of their protocol now is to give tryouts to free agents almost every week. They've got somebody they look at.
That kind of leads me. We're talking about analyzing all these positions, and we're talking about the very present. I love looking long term. I love looking big picture. So I'm going to switch up and talk about something that no one's been talking about: the quarterback position. So, with the benching of Mitch Trubisky and most likely that experiment being over, and Nick Foles at least having the reins to the offense for this year, what do you guys think? And I'm just presenting this question because I don't really have an answer either. What do you think the future of the quarterback position is in Chicago? Because Trubisky, most likely, they will be going somewhere else. Nick Foles can opt out to try to get a bigger contract, and if he plays well, it might be in his best financial interest to do so. And if he doesn't play well, I mean, he's still under contract and he'll be around. So that kind of puts the Bears in a weird situation where you're not sure who's going to be the quarterback next year, because if Foles opts out, the Bears probably aren't going to go sign him to a big contract. I don't think that's going to be their plan, which means they would have to draft somebody, which means you'd have to start a rookie unless you go out and sign another free agent to be a bridge. But if you're in a win now mode, you don't really want a bridge quarterback. So this whole mess is kind of, even though Foles may play well this year, this whole thing could fall on its face come the off season.
My goodness. That was a scary
I didn't mean to be a downer.
But I feel like that's the reason why that I feel like they wanted Trubisky to succeed to avoid this entire mess, because if he did, they wouldn't be considering that. Like, it would be to sign Trubisky to an extension, and they wouldn't have to worry about a bridge quarterback or going out and having to draft somebody. But obviously that did not happen. So now they're in a worst case kind of scenario. Obviously, we hope that Foles does well so this team can win. But if he does, like you said, he could opt out, and the Bears could be looking to draft a quarterback and then bring in yet another bridge quarterback. So I don't know, man.
Whatever my opinion is on it, I'm sure that Ryan Pace is going to do the exact opposite of it, because that seems to be the history that I have with Ryan Pace. But I sincerely believe that next season they have to draft a quarterback. Now, whether it's in round 1 or round 2 or round 3, in one of those rounds, they have to draft a quarterback, because I can't imagine them not trying to bring in at least a developmental quarterback, and perhaps even a guy who could be starting next year. Because let's face it, if they go 8-8 or 9-7 and just miss the playoffs, then this team has to start thinking about blowing things up. Maybe that's why A-Rob hasn't been signed to a contract. Maybe they start getting rid of players, and they've gone to the McCaskey family and gotten their blessing and saying, listen, we gave it a shot. We spent a lot of money on acquiring these guys and so forth, but it's clearly not going to work because our choice in quarterback failed us, and so we need to start over. And I think that Virginia and the McCaskey family loves Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy so much that they'll say, okay, guys, go ahead, start over and make it work this time. So that's a scenario. That's a possibility. I hate to say it, because of the quarterback position, because they may not be able to find a capable quarterback to take another shot at a championship with these aging defensive stars. So I'm a little worried.
Yeah, I mean, they got the oldest defense in the league, and it's only gonna stay in this window of efficiency for so long. We're already seeing some things that we're already seeing some players fall off a little bit. I'll present the question. I don't think they even have the financial flexibility to do this, but and I don't think it's going to happen anyway, but just for the sake of this conversation and because it's fun to talk about, some of the Jerry Jones has been ripping Dak Prescott again about how he's not Tony Romo or Patrick Mahomes. Mm-hmm. Any way that let's say Dak Prescott hits the open market, which they could still franchise tag him again or sign him to a long-term deal. Once again, The odds of this happening, very minuscule. But if someone like Dak Prescott becomes available, would the Bears even want to sign someone to him to a massive contract, or even have the ability to do that if they're going to, if like you said, Aldo, well, we're getting older, we might need to blow it up. Why would we sign a quarterback to a $200 million deal? But if someone like that comes along who's 27 years old and shows that he can be at least a top 10 quarterback in the league, aren't the Bears kind of starved for that? Isn't that something you can start a rebuild around? I think
that if somebody like Dak became available, then you seriously have to consider making a pitch to try to get him onto this team, because he is 27 years old, because he is a proven commodity. And so then, you've got to figure out how to do it and what salaries you shed and how you can build through the draft to give him the supporting cast that he needs to win some games. It would almost be a partial rebuild, because I don't think that they could keep the core players and that humongous salary. So they'd have to get lucky in the draft, and they'd have to get lucky with some journeyman free agents to have a competitive team. But down the line, in 2 or 3 years into Dak's tenure here in Chicago, they could be contending for a Super Bowl. But boy, oh boy, the whole Trubisky thing is just such a fiasco. Mitch not working out as it appears that he's not has really throwing a wrench into the future of this franchise.
Yeah, I want to get your thoughts on that, Alyssa, just because it's fun to talk about, because the odds of that happening are so small. Yeah, really. But if Dak Prescott were available, do you think the Bears go out, throw the book at him, and say, whatever number you need, write it down on this checkbook, because obviously they still use checkbooks for this stuff. But if he were available to sign, would you be willing to say, okay, this is going to probably take a 2, maybe 3-year rebuild to build around the quarterback now and try to get him the pieces like through the draft and things like that?
I mean, like Aldo said, I think you have to go after it. If a quarterback like him is on the market there, and instead of just completely blowing everything up, if it is, like Aldo said, a partial rebuild, then you have to go for it. I mean, I know that, Dak gets a lot of, bad rap in the, in the press and all that stuff, but I mean, he's a talented quarterback. He is a proven quarterback. He might not be Patrick Mahomes level money here, but I mean, what's the last quarterback that the Bears have had that is even Dak Prescott level? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
right.
No.
So it's just, I think if he's out there, they have to at least try to make it work.
Yeah,
try to go get him.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, Aldo, to your point about rebuilding, that now again, whenever you're gonna blow it all up and build up, are you gonna build around a draft pick again? Are you gonna spend a high draft pick on a quarterback again and hopefully it works? And then if that doesn't work, then you set yourself back 5 years again? Are we talking about the Bears doing a rebuild again in 6 years? And we're talking about a decade of mediocrity or subpar play. So I think if you have the potential to go and get a proven quarterback, and yeah, you're going to spend a lot of money because he's in his mid-20s. You're going to spend a hell of a lot of money, but at least you're getting something. Mm-hmm. You're not buying a scratch-off ticket for $1. You're just going and you're just putting in. You're buying the $50,000 savings bond instead, because at least you're going to get some return on that. Unlike, we'll draft a guy 10th overall or 15th overall, and that's our future for the next 10 years, and then then we're in the position we are now. So I mean, if you're going to rebuild, are you going to go all in on a high draft pick at quarterback again?
Well, it's funny that you're bringing this topic up, because tomorrow on the season premiere of Draft on Tap, we're taking a whole new approach to the season. Neil Stafzinski has joined the show. He worked for Mississippi State and had a position where he would help NFL teams come in and interview college prospects and so forth. And so he's been in the college football evaluation profession for some time. He's going to join Danny Shinman. And what we're going to do is they are going to play for the entire season on our show. They're going to play Chicago Bears scouts, and I'm going to play the role of Ryan Pace. And so I'm going to kind of rush into the room and say, I need a quarterback. I need a quarterback. Tell me who's out there. And then they'll give me a list of their top 10 collegiate quarterbacks. So after tomorrow's show, I will have some names for us to talk about in the future and say, well, there's a kid named Jamie Newman, and there's another kid named. So it really is a fascinating topic, and I hope that people will join us on Draft on Tap. We've got really two great analysts in Neil and Danny, and it'll be fun just playing through these scenarios about the Bears' needs and the collegiate players that are out there. And some of them aren't even playing this season. So I brought up the name Jamie Newman. I don't think he's playing because he transferred to Georgia from Wake Forest, and then he opted out, so he's not playing, but he's still considered a guy that maybe he could be like a Dak Prescott type guy. And he might be available in the 3rd or 4th round, like Prescott was drafted in the 4th round. So it's some interesting scenarios that we'll play through with this whole thing.
Yeah, that's really cool. Go ahead.
I would say, plus we know Pace's track record in the 1st round compared to the later rounds. So if he's one of those 4th round, I mean, I feel a lot better about that than a 1st round quarterback, which sounds really weird to say, but
absolutely,
it's just Pace.
It's so true.
I want to put a bow on this whole quarterback thing, just because there is a real solid chance that this is it for Mitchell Trubisky in Chicago. Yeah. I mean, outside of coming back in relief or coming back in because of injury, this whole Mitchell Trubisky thing is probably done in Chicago. So that being said, I want to go around the horn and ask you guys what to reflect on the Trubisky era from the time he was drafted to now. What have your emotions been, or how have you seen this whole thing play out? Alyssa, I'll start with you. From the time the Bears traded up a spot, and I was like, well, are they really trading up to get Jamal Adams? That's crazy. And then they take Mitchell Trubisky. Take me through the roller coaster ride for you.
No, I was pissed when they traded up and drafted him. I thought they were going Jamal Adams, they're going defense, and I'm like, why the hell are they taking a quarterback? Yep. But and then I think that, that first preseason game is what I remember watching him against the Broncos. And I know it's just preseason, but like that's when he really started to flash. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we might have something here. And little did I know that roller coaster that was going to come. Oh my goodness. But, obviously the first year under John Fox, I was, don't really like to factor that thing in because they hardly let him throw the ball. But looking at 2018, I felt like at least, after that Tampa Bay game, and I'm like, okay, maybe he's got something here. Maybe Matt Nagy is the guy. But the one word that I think about Trubisky is inconsistent, and it's frustrating because he has the talent. He's shown that he has the skill. His legs are certainly a weapon for this team, but he just hasn't been able to put it together. And I think he's such a good guy too, and I think that's why we all wanted him to succeed because he is a good guy. He did it right. He's put in the hard work. He's done everything this organization has asked him to do, except for be the guy, and that's just something that he wasn't able to do. So like you said, there's a chance that we still see him down the line this season, be it injury, knock on wood, or, maybe Foles, stinks it up, but I don't really see that happening. But, it's been a long journey with Trubisky, but I'm always going to remember just like how frustrating it was that he didn't pan out. Another failed quarterback on the Bears' 100-year history.
Gosh, I wish I was playing like sad violin music there. I might do a promo out of that. That was good. But I got to tell you, I've had a rocky relationship with Mitch. I was so upset when Ryan Pace traded up one spot to get Trubisky, and I had him ranked as a second-round quarterback for all of those old-fashioned reasons that we learn about player evaluation when we're falling in love with this game of football. As he's only been quarterback for 1 year of football, and you like to draft a guy who has at least had 2 years and preferably 3 or 4 years as a starter. Well, he had 1 year, and then I got my hands on the all-22 of his college, which is really, really difficult to get. And so I looked at it, and I saw those mechanical problems. I saw that left foot going way out to the wide left, and I was wondering, wow, he gets away with this in college, but is he going to be able to get away? Well, the Bears will fix that. But I hated the fact that and frankly, again, I've said this a million times. I'll say it 1,000,001 times. I loved Patrick Mahomes and the miracles that he was doing at Texas Tech. So be that as it may, so he has his first play with his first series in a Bears practice game, and then I fell in love with him. He marched the team downfield. He was rolling to his right, throwing bullets, and I thought to myself, wow, this guy looks good. And then Mike Glennon comes in. He stinks, and I'm leading this campaign, start Mitch Trubisky, and so forth. And then he didn't look that good. But then I just started blaming it on John Fox and Dow Loggins. Well, fast forward to the next year, we bring in the quarterback whisperer, Matt Nagy, and so forth. And I'm thinking, man, it's going to turn out well. Well, he starts off slow that season, but then he's got that game against Tampa Bay where he throws 6 touchdown passes. And I'm saying, oh, I'm so glad I was wrong about this kid. He's going to be the greatest of all time. Well, then, so that's been the relationship with Mitch. Up and down, breaks my heart, makes me happy, breaks my heart, makes me happy. So I'm glad he's leaving.
I'm sure I'll find it, but I have a tweet from the day after the draft, and it said, I had a nightmare last night that Mitchell Trubisky was going to be my starting quarterback. Oh, wait. And so I clearly didn't love the draft pick. I was working in TV at the time. I was in the newsroom and I was watching the draft, and we were probably about an hour away from going live, and so we had a little bit of downtime. But watching the draft, and I saw that the Bears traded up to number 2. I'm like, who are they taking at number 2? I'm like, I don't think they're taking Solomon Thomas. I'm like, it seems like they don't need to draft. They don't need to draft up to get Jamal Adams. For the record, I wanted them to take Jamal Adams and then take DeShone Kizer in the second round. I understand what happened to DeShone Kizer, but at least they would have been whipping on a second rounder, not a first rounder.
Right.
But when they said Mitchell Trubisky, everyone in the sports department turned and looked at me. There was silence. I didn't say anything, and then they started laughing at me. So I was like, oh, good. And I was just in shock. I'm like, really? this is what they're doing. So they go and they sign Glennon. They signed Glennon to that whole contract. So I thought, okay, whatever, we'll see. Glennon might do something. Well, obviously Glennon didn't do anything. And then Trubisky came in, and I remember saying on this show, well, can you imagine if they didn't take Trubisky and we had to do the entire year with Mike Glennon? There'd be nothing to talk about. There'd be no hope. There'd be nothing to watch with this team because there's nothing up and coming in the quarterback position. So at least they got a rookie to look at whenever they're with John Fox and this awful team. He's a lame duck coach. So at least there's something to be hopeful for. You can watch their shiny new toy that they drafted number 2 overall. And so I gave him a pass that rookie season because Dowell Loggins was the whole run pass guy, and I couldn't stand the offense. So I'm like, that's not really a rookie season. That's just, a layover. And so when Nagy came in and he started playing well, and he was doing some things that I didn't see him do before. And I was like, okay, maybe we got something. Maybe there is something here. But there was always just that, but and you just kept seeing that where it's just like, that was a great pass, but did you see that one? Or did you see how he missed this guy wide open in the flats? Or did you see how he took that really bad sack, or how he ran around for 18 yards and he lost it on 3rd down and took him out of field goal range? Like, but and although I hated the draft pick, I wanted it to work in the worst way. Sure. Honest to God, I'm like, okay, if they're taking a quarterback this high, I want this guy to be here for the next 15 years, and I want him to make me look like an ass for saying I don't think he's going to be very good. And
absolutely.
It just never happened, and it just never took it to that next level. And so, Aldo, much like you said, you build me up to break me down. You build me up. You got to understand when a toxic relationship has run its course, and I just can't.
Yes.
I can't do it anymore. And I'm to the point now where I'm relieved that Nick Foles is the quarterback. How much have we gone through that I'm relieved that Nick Foles is a starter in Chicago, and he probably won't be the starter next year.
Yeah,
but he's here now. He's our rebound.
Right.
Nick Foles is our rebound girl, and he's going to carry us for the rest of the year. And he may not be Mr. Wright, but he's Mr. Right now. And that's kind of what we need in Chicago. So I just wanted to put a yeah.
That's good.
Give us a ring, then you can go, baby. Just give us the ring.
Nick
We're
will
good.
put a ring on
Please.
it. He'll be like the other guy. He'll put a ring on it, Nick. But
one last thought.
I wanted to put a bow on the quarterback situation.
That was a beautiful bow, indeed. One last thought about drafting a quarterback, and I don't trust Ryan Pace in evaluating quarterbacks because he doesn't have a good track record. But the good thing is if Matt Nagy and John DeFilippo, I always have a problem with that name. If the quarterback coach is around, then maybe their influence in evaluating tape and making a recommendation on who the next quarterback the Bears draft could, prove for some value there.
There are some new voices there, so I would say that might play a part in it, and so I just. Do they use a first rounder? Is that where we're at? Where you got to go because there's plenty of other places they could use a first rounder and not make at least a 4 to 5 year commitment to a starting quarterback. So there's a lot that's being sorted out, and I don't want to kick the can too far down the road just because the Bears are 3-0. We want to see how the 2020 season goes. If they make the playoffs, if they make a deep run in the playoffs, we're not talking about blowing up and rebuilding anything. Right. So we'll see where it goes. One off the wall question I have for you, Aldo, that came up in my mind during George's interview about the Colts. I wanted to ask you specifically today, if I said you could have Quentin Nelson, but you have to give back Roquan Smith, are you doing it?
Yes, I am.
Mm-hmm. Feel free to elaborate.
Oh, that's right. This is a podcast. I just feel like the interior offensive line has become so important in today's NFL with the quick passing game. And quarterbacks just love to have that pocket. They love to step up in the pocket. It's a quick passing game, and so defensive coordinators are scheming against that. They're sending their best pass rushers up the middle to try to disrupt that, and so you need to have a strong interior line. In addition to that, is this truly is a special player. And Roquan is a special player too, but not to this level. I mean, truly, Quentin Nelson is the kind of guy who just electrifies a team and the crowd that appreciates offensive line play. He finishes his blocks in such a dramatic fashion. I mean, he literally bulldozes people into the ground and tries to bury them down there. And I just love to have that sneering, tough guy, eat glass offensive lineman like a Kyle Long was at right guard for the Bears for a few seasons, and to have a left guard like Quentin Nelson, I would take that. There was a question posed to me: do you Roquan Smith, and I forgot who was the second round draft pick that year? Quentin Nelson and
is it James Daniels?
James
and
Daniels.
Anthony Miller?
Yes, James Daniels. So would you trade those two, Roquan Smith and James Daniels, for Quentin Nelson and Darius Leonard, the Colts second round draft pick, who has been in his rookie year, he was a Pro Bowl linebacker, and I was like, yes,
give it to me, give it to me.
Yep, I'll take that.
I feel like that's a steal.
Me too.
I don't think the Colts will take that.
No,
right, they wouldn't. And Chris Ballard, I would like to have too as our general manager. Can you throw him in on the trade too?
Can we trade GMs and the draft picks they had?
I like that idea.
We could have had Mahomes if Ballard was GM, probably.
Oh my gosh! Yes.
Heartache, guys. Come on. All right. So, but I'll get us out on this. So let's bring it all. Because we've been talking a lot of big picture stuff. So let's bring it back to a little more of a present day thing. If the Bears are going to win this week, what actually has to happen? I mean, I think that Foles has to put together a complete game. And I know that I've been asking that out of Trubisky. He hadn't been able to do it. I think that they need to go out and they got to score touchdowns. And Foles did that last week, at least in the fourth quarter. But I think that has to continue where they're not just playing on a 65-yard field and hopefully they can get themselves in field goal range and they can eke out a 20-17 win. I think they got to have long drives that end in 7 because we saw last week they were ruling time of possession and they were losing. So these drives have to end in points, and I am just so anxious to see what Nick Foles does with a whole week of preparation with number 1 reps. So for me, it's just finishing drives, not petering out at the opponent's 45 or settling for a 46-yard field goal that isn't a guarantee by any stretch of the imagination. So I think that their conversion on third down is going to be critical because at the first half. Last week, I think they were 1 for 5 or something along those lines where they were pretty poor in third down conversion. That's going to be key this week to keep the offense on the field. But I was just wondering your thoughts. Alyssa, I'll start with you.
No, I was going to say exactly what you said, a complete game. I feel like if we've been holding Trubisky to that standard, we have to hold Foles to that standard too. And I know that he came off the bench in the middle of that game, but he has an entire week to prepare. He's been, he's worked in an offense similar to this. And I feel like not just Foles, but the entire offense needs to start fast and finish strong because now that you're starting to play more talented teams like the Colts, who I know they have played, teams that are combined 1-8, just like the Bears, but they took care of business in a way the Bears didn't. They beat the crap out of the teams they should have, even though they should have beaten the Jaguars too. But, they took care of business like the Bears didn't. So I want to see the Bears take care of business on Sunday. I mean, on offense, if they score touchdowns, on defense, obviously they got to get after Phillip Rivers. I think that this is a very winnable game. I mean, heading into this game, I was like, if Trubisky's the quarterback, I'm gonna go with the Colts to eke one out. But I think with Foles, I think I'm gonna pick the Bears to just squeak one out here.
Yeah, great points by both of you. And I'll add that, Phillip Rivers is going to be a sitting duck back there. So I would love to see Quinn get in on some sack action along with Mack to continue his progression and getting back to the quarterback. And then the other thing that I'd like to see from a special team standpoint is that replacement to Tariq Cohen, whoever it's going to be, play a mistake-free game. And I'm not necessarily saying take it back to the house although I'll gladly take a special teams touchdown, but, don't turn the ball over. Don't, fair catch when you shouldn't fair catch, or let it bounce all the way to the 1 when you should have fair caught it at the 10 or whatever. Just kind of a mistake-free game. And so I'm with Alyssa. This is an entirely winnable game. There's no reason why we shouldn't get off to a 4-0 start, and it would be really, really nice if we had a convincing win, so that when we do Bear football Sunday afternoon, even when we do the halftime show, we're happy, and then when we do the closing part of the show, we're even happier.
I wish you could do I wish you could do side by sides of like the halftime demeanor and then the post game demeanor on our show after this, because I'm ready to just throw my computer across the room at halftime, because I'm like, how can you be this bad after finishing so well at the previous game? And then they come back and they do it again and they totally redeem themselves. Yeah. And it's just me sitting like, okay, I was an ass. I jumped to too many conclusions at halftime. You guys pulled it off again. I would like to see a full game get put together where they just, it's a real solid performance against a solid team to let us know that, because right now, everyone's, you're listening to any kind of analyst, are saying the Bears are the worst 3-0 team they've seen for a while. And it's just, I want something that would legitimize the team would go a long way in this season, because I think they believe in themselves. I don't think they need validation from anybody else. I'm going to be selfish and say I need to see it. I want to see it as someone who supports the Bears. Just show me you can beat a solid team, and you can do it pretty handedly. So that's what I'll be looking for. But I dream. Dream on. Before we close things out, Alyssa and I have a new show that debuted last week, one that I'm so excited about. We're calling it Pass the Mic. It's a show all about empowering female voices in sports media. We had an awesome inaugural show. We had Peggy Kaczynski on, just a legendary Chicago sportscaster. Alyssa and I heard some stories that, that probably had never been brought to the public before, probably never been told out loud before. And it was just such a fun interview. It's obviously talking about the struggles and the journey of female media members, but it's also fun because we talk sports, and we talked about the Bulls, the Bears, the Olympics, and things like that. So, Alyssa, I think it's safe to say we had a lot of fun on that show.
We did, and I think Peggy was the perfect first guest. She's accomplished. She had so much to share. She did share the struggles that she went through, but it was also like, even just like interviewing her, like, and listening to her, it was empowering, as a woman in sports, to hear everything she's gone through and her advice. And I'm super excited to share this with the world. And I know that we're going to have even more amazing women on this podcast. So I'm just super excited to keep working on this.
Yeah, that show's every other Thursday, and you can go back and listen to it. We'll have the whole library up online. It's a real fun project. It's an important project, especially in today's age. So we hope that you all give it a listen and a share with your friends. And don't forget that after every Bears game, Aldo, Tyler Ellis, and I give you our immediate thoughts about the Bears' performance on the new post-game show, Bear Football. We just talked about that. We even pop in at halftime where my head explodes, and then it goes back to normal after the Bears win. So there's a lot of emotion, there's a lot of passion, there's a lot of good football talk, and that's always a good time with myself, Aldo, and Tyler Ellis. So it's something it's something new that we're trying this year, and so far it's been a hell of a lot of fun.
Though, John, I'd like to say I'd rather your head explode at halftime than at the end of the game, selfishly, because that means the Bears are pulling it out. But yeah,
You're right. Yeah.
And I want to add that, as always, the best way to stay informed about all of the great things happening here at the Bar Room is to visit the newly opened website, barroomnetwork.com. Bookmark it so it's easy to find, and bookmark bearswire.com. I'm the managing editor over there, and we're getting you ready for this week's game against the Colts.
Definitely check that out. But that's going to do it for us. For Aldo Gandia, Alyssa Barbieri, I'm John Buffone. Enjoy the game, everybody. We'll talk to you next week.